What's going on, guys? Today we're going to compare the DJI Osmo Action and the GoPro Hero 7. Now I'm really excited about this comparison because I've been getting so many questions, responses. Which should I get, the Osmo Action or the GoPro Hero 7? So I'm going to answer that question because this comparison goes beyond just side-by-side statistics, which I made in a video over here. This one goes into practicality, real-world use. That's what we're going to talk about today. So as most of you know, the GoPro Hero 7 has been around for a while, and the DJI Osmo Action is just about a month or maybe a month and a half, almost 2 months old. So this is the newbie, this is the old guy, old reliable GoPro, and which is better? So before we get into the comparison, I just want to talk about my settings. For the DJI Osmo Action, I shot in 4K, and I put the basically no warping on, or anti-warp, basically to keep all the lines straight. And then with the GoPro Hero 7, I shot at 2.7K instead of 4K because you're able to go in linear. And if you put them side by side, if I shot in 4K with the GoPro, it would have been way too wide, and it also would have been slightly, has that distortion to it. So in other words, to get rid of that distortion, to have the same sort of field of view as the DJI Osmo Action, I had to shoot in 2.7K. But side by side, you can't really tell the difference. In fact, you'll be surprised by the two side by side. And I'll talk about that at the end of this video after we see this comparison. And one more thing I'll say is that at the very end of this video, I'm gonna do a slow motion. So I shot at 24 frames per second for the comparison you're gonna see. And at the end of the video, I shoot at 240 frames per second. But I shot at 24 frames per second because I want to go for that cinematic look. And I did just handheld, held it on a monopod and a monopod side by side. So I just walked around with it. And you're going to get to see the stabilization side by side as well. But that's it for my settings. If you have a question, leave it in the comments below. So let's go down to Little Havana in downtown Miami, where I did a side by side comparison right now. All right, so I didn't want to give you my opinion right off the bat because I didn't want to influence your opinion. I wanted you to see them side by side so you could come to your own conclusion. And I'm sure you have a lot of conclusions, a lot of comments and questions, so leave that in the comments below. But I hope this comparison cleared up a lot of things. I'm going to give you my opinion now, and I looked at it closely. I stopped the footage, I kind of analyzed the video side by side, and here's some of my thoughts that might help you. And of course, you guys always see things that I don't, so I appreciate your comments below. So what I saw was that the GoPro Hero 7 in general seems a little bit sharper than the Osmo Action, but not for every scene. Like when I shot against the wall with that painting of the two girls and some other scenes, the GoPro looked sharper. Also in low light, it looked sharper and had less noise. So the GoPro had more dynamic range when I was walking outside, and it was a real contrasty situation where it was a real bright sky and then there was shadow near the stores on the left. I could still see the blue sky and clouds with the GoPro Hero 7, but with the DJI Osmo Action, the sky was completely blown out. It was all white. So I was really surprised by how much dynamic range is in the GoPro Hero 7. It's very impressive, and the DJI Osmo Action is definitely behind the GoPro in that department. And in general, the GoPro just seemed slightly brighter. Everything seemed a little brighter. The DJI Osmo Action had a little more contrast to it. So it had a little more film look, because usually film has a little more of that contrast. But the noise and the lack of detail in the shadow was really disappointing with the Osmo Action, which I did see, you know, in the low light and in the shadow detail. I saw that in the GoPro. Did very well in that department. Now the thing is, this comparison is so difficult, especially when you talk about the colors, because when you're shooting, you're usually going to shoot people in most situations. Some people don't shoot any people, but shooting people, the Osmo Action is definitely better with the skin tones, especially Caucasian people, especially if they're burned or a little darker, have more of a reddish skin, fair skin and red skin. It looks way too red because the reds on the GoPro Hero 7 look almost orange. It's really bad. For example, if you were shooting my logo right here and my hat with the GoPro, it would look almost orange. Okay, with the DJI Osmo Action, it might look even a little too much red, like a little more on that side, but it's way more accurate. I wish it was a little more saturated, like it might be a little too desaturated just out of the bat, because that's how I was filming. I wasn't using the flat profile and color grading. I was just using it straight how it is. But the GoPro seems pretty good in situations where you want that nice bright color and so forth, but the greens don't look very real at all. So grass and trees will look better with the DJI Osmo Action, as well as the reds, of course. And then the GoPro, the greens, they don't look right for trees and grass, in my opinion. And the reds look orange and they don't look accurate. So it looks kind of weird. You can still get away with it, but it's so annoying because this did so many things well, such as the high dynamic range, it's overall sharper, and it also has better audio. I know I didn't test it in this video, but they're both good with audio. It's just with the DJI Osmo Action, you have to raise it much more in post, but they both have good audio. The GoPro, I would say, is slightly better just for using without having to manipulate it in post-production. One other thing the GoPro does better than the DJI Osmo Action, in my opinion, it lets that sun flare in, which I like as a filmmaker. If you don't like it, then you'll prefer the DJI Osmo Action. So when you're shooting into the sun and you get that flare from the sun, you're not gonna really get it too much with the Osmo Action, but with the GoPro Hero 7, you get it, and it has that nice warm tone to it. So I really like that with the GoPro. Now I was just walking around normal. You saw at one point I did a sprint down the sidewalk and you saw them side by side. The stabilization is very good for the GoPro, but the DJI Osmo Action has better stabilization. You could see the background and so forth wasn't moving as much. It was rock steady, as DJI calls its stabilization. So I was extremely shocked at how good the stabilization is with the DJI Osmo Action. Every time I use it, I'm amazed. You don't need a gimbal or anything else. You can just use it as it is. A gimbal might help slightly, but really you don't need it. It's really overkill. The GoPro you might need it, but it's still very good. It's just the DJI Osmo Action, the stabilization is absolutely incredible. So I know I gave you kind of an ambiguous answer because they both do things that very well. It's really hard for me to choose just one. I wish the color tone was sort of in between the two. The GoPro seems too warm and too saturated. The DJI Osmo Action out of the bat seems too desaturated and too flat and not enough dynamic range. If they could almost combine them and have a baby, that would be great, but they don't. So they're both very good. Obviously with the Osmo Action, it has a front screen, so if you vlog, that's a huge advantage, but it's really hard for me to pick a winner. So before the end of this video, I just want to wrap it up by showing you the slow motion, because I didn't get to show you that. And the slow motion both look really good. I shot at 240 frames per second. The one thing you're going to see in the slow motion, notice with the GoPro Hero 7, the flare that comes into the lens. So let's just take a few moments to look at that slow motion. All right. Alright guys, that was it. I hope this video was helpful. You got to see a side-by-side comparison in the real world, just a quick comparison with these two guys, sort of quick. And as always, I do appreciate your support. So one last thing before I end this video with these two action cameras, I'm going to bring them both down to the real Havana, Cuba next week. So if there's any videos you want me to film while I'm down there, I wanted to bring my drone, but drones aren't allowed in Cuba, but I can bring these guys. So I'm gonna shoot with these guys. If there's any particular video you think might be cool, you wanna see, I'll do that for you. Just leave it in the comments below. If you did find this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to my channel so you get all the new videos when I release them. And please share this video as well with a friend or someone else who you think it might be helpful with. And that's it guys. I'm Breck Aramella with BreckAramella.com. Drones for real.